How many of you have sat through a presentation that couldn't keep your attention? The presenter kept talking and talking, and there was no interaction, no engagement, and quite frankly, you were falling asleep. I think we've all been there. So that's one of the biggest challenges for a presenter, is to put together a presentation that's going to keep the attention of audience members. In fact, 14% of audience engagement drops if the presenter does all of the talking and doesn't engage with the audience. So how can you do that as a presenter? One simple way is to create an emotional connection with your audience. Studies show that 60 to 70% is the ideal amount of eye contact to make an emotional connection. But there's a caveat. You don't want to make an emotional connection with just one person, and you don't want to make it uncomfortable. More than 10 seconds of eye contact makes it really awkward for you, the person you're staring at, and everybody else in the audience. So you want to keep your gaze moving, and don't just pick out one or two people for your presentation. Hi, my name's Brianna Carl, and today we're going to be looking at some simple ways you can implement to keep your presentation engaging, visually appealing, and how to also work in teams. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be looking at specifically today. We've already talked a lot about audience engagement and the importance of keeping their attention, but you have to remember, you're still the focus of your presentation. Supplemental elements can be used as aids and beneficial visualizations to keep that presentation going. And once it's all over, you're going to have to field some question and answers. So we'll look at some of those too. Finally, how do you present in teams effectively? First and foremost, you have to remember that you are the focus of your presentation. Whether it's a virtual presentation, you're using a PowerPoint, or you're using other visual aids like pamphlets, you're the focus and you need to keep that attention on you. Let's watch a video to see how you can do that and stay in focus. This is a great example for visual presentations or virtual.
The three biggest ways scammers are reaching out to people are through phone calls, text messages, and emails.
As you can see, the presenter stayed in focus on a smaller screen, while the visuals that she was using to show ways scammers can contact you is in a bigger screen next to her. Another way to stay in focus is get rid of all of the words on the screen. If you have a lot to say and you don't want to distract your audience with what you're going to talk about next or what you already talked about, it's okay to use white space as your advantage. Those are just some ways you can use supplemental visuals in your presentation. Next, I'm going to ask you to watch a video and see what this presenter does that works and what you think maybe doesn't work in this next presentation.
All right, thanks, Sean. And if you plan on traveling in the next few days, just a reminder, you want to check out your airline's flight monitors from airports that you might be flying out of. We took a sneak peek tonight about an hour ago just to see how tonight's weather is affecting flights. And really, all in all, out of Cleveland, everything seems to be in pretty good shape. A couple delays there in Cleveland. If we move over to Erie International, doing really well at Erie tonight. Everything seems to be on time, and tonight's weather doesn't seem to be impacting anything there. And then also taking a look at Buffalo, there are a few delays there on tonight's board for Buffalo. So again, if you are traveling anytime in the next few days, you probably want to check with your flight schedule at your airline just to make sure that everything is on time. New York City.
So I put together a quick little checklist to see what you gathered from that presentation. So, number one, did the presenter interpret the slides instead of reading them? I'd say yes, she did. Did she talk to the audience? For the most part, she did talk to the audience, other than when she was turning to move the screen and then you saw the full picture. Was it easy to read content? What do you think? I would say no. It was very congested, a whole lot of words, and even though she was explaining and narrating what to look at, as an audience member, it was very difficult to keep up and pinpoint where the delays, what flight monitor are we looking at now, and so on and so forth. So let's try again. Let's watch another video with a different presenter who does it a little differently and possibly, I would say, a little better this time.
Mike, we've all been there. Christmas morning and the present you just opened is not at all what you wanted. So here's a look at some of the top returned gifts. We have clothes, no surprise, at the most returned item at 62%. It's followed by shoes at 40%, kitchen appliances at 20% of all the returns, and followed by makeup, which is 10% of all returns. We all return gifts, but who returns the most might end up surprising you.
Okay, so as you saw, she had pictures, she had numbers, and those popped up as she was talking. So she was interacting with her audience, keeping them visually engaged, and getting to the point of her presentation, which was what is returned during Christmas time. After your presentation is all over and done with, you're probably going to have a question and answer. And sometimes those questions can be difficult to answer, whether it's somebody trying to steer you off guard, ask you something that you don't know the answer to, or insult you. There are two ways that you can approach this in a very tactful manner. First, pause. Take a moment to gather your thoughts, understand the question being asked before answering. Then answer honestly. If you don't know the answer, respectfully explain that. By answering honestly, you're showing your authenticity, which also builds your credibility. So let's watch a video where Steve Jobs is asked a rather insulting question and how he uses both pause and honest answering to respond.
Like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenDoc. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
You know, you can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas.
As you saw, Steve Jobs took the time to process the question, think about how he wanted to answer it, and then he answered honestly. He said, "You're right." And then later in the presentation, he explains why this person was right and why maybe not so much. Moving on to presenting in teams. Now this can be a challenge because maybe you have your topic and teammate has their topic and teammate C has their topic, and somehow you're all going to come together and present one whole product. There's some simple ways that you can do that so it seems seamless and rehearsed. Number one, form unity. Stand together in a line and a group to show you're all part of this presentation. Number two, you want to introduce the next presenter. You can call them by name, and you can segue with just a simple transitional sentence. Let's watch a video to see how professional presenters do just that.
Our Erie News Now, Haley Potter was one of our first reporters here on the scene today, and you first learn, Haley, of these horrific details.
Emily, this father was supposed to be at a child custody hearing earlier today, and when he didn't show up, his family members came to this home to check on him, and when they got here to the home, there was smoke just escaping this house. And even though state police seem to know how this scene played out, of course, there's still a lot under investigation at this hour right now, Emily.
Yeah, such a gut-wrenching story here today, Haley. And our Elspeth Meisner was also on the scene today, and she spoke with several family members and neighbors here, and we're going to get their reaction coming up a little bit later in the news.
As you saw at the beginning of the presentation, all three of them were present, and then the focus shifted to Emily, who was transitioning into Haley. And then later on, Haley transitions back to Emily, who begins to introduce the next presenter. So let's wrap this all up in a happy little bow and watch one last video that shows some examples of everything that we talked about today. I want you to watch and see where you can find elements of teamwork, the use of visual aids, and engaging the audience.
But one thing that we've learned from all of this is that the Erie community is ready and willing to help these young children. Live outside of the dormitories on Oliver Road, Elspeth Meisner, Erie News Now.
Yeah, that most definitely is true, and this is proof that people are willing to help, especially when people need it the most. Elspeth Meisner, thanks so much for that report. Well, those children will be sleeping in a safe place tonight for many of them after what was a treacherous and heartbreaking journey to America.
All right. So whether it is presenting virtually, presenting for a class, presenting for live television, or presenting for a live audience, there are many ways that you can implement simple things to keep your audience engaged. Make eye contact. Use visual aids. Don't read to your audience, but talk to them. Tell a story. Answer your questions honestly, and don't forget to pause. It's okay to let your presentation breathe. Thank you for your time, and here's a list of my references.